Welcome to the Amicable Divorce Network podcast. My name is Tracy Ann Moore-Grant, and I'm the founder of the Amicable Divorce Network. Our podcast is here to educate those before, during, and after divorce, as well as divorce professionals, about all of the issues that impact a family law case. We are here to educate you about difficult topics, provide you new information, and also give solutions for how to navigate all of the issues in family law and still bring your family law case to an efficient conclusion. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Amicable Divorce Network podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Ann Moore-Grant, founder of the Amicable Divorce Network. We are now on season 3 of the podcast. Thank you so much for following along, for liking, and for subscribing. We are seeing all of that interest, and it's so nice to see all of the positive feedback that you all are getting. Really great information and tips about divorce from the podcast. So thank you very much for all of that. And we are continuing with that great information today. I am joined by one of our Amicable Divorce Network members across the pond in England, and it's Chloe Oudiz, and she is a divorce coach and founder of Divorce Differently. And she has been a guest on the podcast before, so you may recognize her, and she was a contributor to our first book, so she is definitely an expert in many areas. She also had the esteemed pleasure of winning one of our Amicable Awards for 2025. We love to reward people who are out there doing really good work to help people resolve things outside of the court system. And her award was having the most popular blog post on our UK website. It also was very highly ranked on Divorce Amicably for clients. And this particular blog post was about why people should or should not tell their employer that they're going through a divorce. Chloe, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything else you want to tell people about yourself before we get started?
No, I think that's a brilliant introduction. Thank you so much, Tracy.
All right, great. So what did you see going on, I guess, with your clients, with people asking you questions that prompted you to think that this would be a great article?
Yeah, I think it was a question that I was being asked a lot by clients. I find that, as we all know, divorce is an incredibly stressful event. And for a lot of people, it's really distracting. It takes a lot of time. Just the business of divorce takes a lot of time. And of course, it creates a lot of emotional turmoil and sometimes additional childcare responsibilities. So it really has an impact on your productivity at work. And I was seeing a lot of people really struggle to try to keep up appearances in the workplace. There was a sense that I had to plow through, pretend everything's okay. And it raised the question of whether that made sense for them from a mental health perspective, from an endurance perspective. And actually sometimes having an honest conversation about what's going on in your life can take away that weight that you're kind of creating and putting on yourself. Yeah. So that's where the idea came from.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic because a lot of people don't want to talk about divorce.
Yeah.
And, the things that you're touching on are all correct. People have, generally a lot of their time taken, especially with a litigated divorce, either sitting in court, preparing for court, depositions, discovery, all these different things that are going to prey upon their emotions and their time and their availability. But people are hesitant to talk about it, which is different where people generally understand and might share, I have a terminally ill patient, or parent, or I have this health condition which is going to impact me. And they're very likely to share that information, but less about going through a divorce. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's still a bit of a stigma, isn't there? And that, when you lose somebody, most companies nowadays have a bereavement policy. It's completely acceptable. Yeah. But I don't think there is that same level of understanding for someone going through divorce. There's less of a sense that you're a victim and that this is just, you're just going through a very rough patch. And so people tend to blame themselves. There's shame associated. And as you say, it feels very personal. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable discussing personal things at work. But the reality is that it's all interconnected, and it's very, very hard to compartmentalize when you've got that degree of change going on.
Yeah, I think people think, well, I got into this marriage, it didn't work out, this is my problem, I need to solve this privately and, do my absolute best. But maybe that's not the right decision, particularly with your employer. So what are your tips for people? Should they tell their employer? Should they keep it a secret, keep it tight? What do you think?
I think it's a very specific, it's a decision that needs to be made in a specific context. It'll depend on the quality of your relationship with your employer. If you're on probation or if you're already well established in the company, there's a lot of factors to put into the mix. I think what's important to realize, and I think a lot of people don't realize, is that there has been research done that shows that there's about 79% of people who are employees say that their work is impacted by going through divorce. And actually there was a study done by the National Business Journal a few years ago that showed a 40% reduction in productivity during the first 6 months of your divorce. So there is no way that this is not impacting your workload. And so my philosophy is that unless you think it's actually worse to announce it, why wouldn't you share that and make sure that people understand the backdrop? Now, what might vary is the ask, because when you're sharing that news, you could choose to just share it so people are aware, or there could be a specific ask behind it. I need flexible working arrangements, or I need to work on fewer projects, whatever it is that you feel you need. And so that ask is the piece that is probably going to vary depending on the quality of your relationship with your employer, how comfortable you are, that the culture in the company will be such that actually saying I'm not at the top of my game right now is going to be okay and not harm your career. And that's a very individual assessment.
Yeah, definitely. Very different employers are going to handle that different ways. So definitely think this out. I happen to be an employer. We have a pretty small business, so I think we would know if something was going on with somebody. But, when we've had different situations, I would say as an employer, I want people to be candid with me and truthful, because you're correct. Like if somebody was all of a sudden, they're supposed to be at work at 8:30 and they're routinely showing up at 9:15, 9:30, different things like that, because now they have to maybe transport a child to school that they didn't have to before. They maybe shared that duty. Maybe that's something also that an employer could adjust. Absolutely. Maybe there's a little bit of remote work. Maybe the hours slightly shift, something like that.
Yeah, and I think also, more and more, and unfortunately not fast enough, but a lot of employers do have benefits for people going through these kind of transitions. Even if it isn't divorce per se, they'll have mental health days that you can take off work. They'll have special arrangements. Sometimes you have free legal services in-house at the company, or access to a therapist. So there's sometimes benefits that people don't realize are out there and are available to them, because there's this tendency to be secretive about what's going on. And actually once you open up, you realize that, oh wow, there's all this support network actually coming from my employer, and I can tap into that. Yeah. And what I would recommend is, for a lot of people, I totally understand that the conversation with your line manager is an uncomfortable one, especially if it's a very hierarchical relationship and it just doesn't, you don't trust the person, like them, whatever it might be. But I would recommend at the bare minimum to let HR know, because somebody somewhere needs to know that this is happening, so that if there is to be an issue, if there was to be that kind of challenge around your performance, or about, this person's always showing up late these days, or seems distracted in meetings, or whatever it might be, there is that evidence that you've shared, that it's not coming out of the blue that you then raise the fact that you're going through this terrible time.
Especially if you're in a performance-based industry, like you're expected to close so many sales, or there's charts about performance, and things like that, you maybe having an off quarter. I will say for people out there that I've been a divorce attorney for 24 years now, and clients usually don't ask me the most important questions.
Yeah.
And one that I encourage them to ask, I sort of volunteer this information though in consult, is how much time is this divorce going to take? What can I expect? If they are employed, how many days can I expect to have to take off work?
Yeah.
What other activities like discovery, things like that, am I going to have to do personally that my lawyer and their team aren't doing? Because a litigated divorce, where you may be sitting in court for a week, or multiple mediations or depositions, gathering years of documents that your lawyer can't do for you, they don't have access, is far different as well than people pursuing an uncontested divorce or an amicable divorce. And so that's something I would say when you're meeting with a lawyer, anybody on your team, to say ask how much personal time am I going to need? Because a lot of people think, I've hired a lawyer, they're going to handle it all. that's what I'm paying for. But there's so many things we can't do. It's a very personal event.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people underestimate the
They
workload
do.
that comes from divorce. Aside from hearings and all that, as you say, gathering information, reviewing emails, because ultimately your lawyer is taking instructions from you, right? So you have to tell them what you want. You have to make all these decisions. And that's very time consuming. And it takes up a lot of brain space as well. And so I think it's slightly unrealistic to hope that you can go through all that and completely hide that from your employer. And actually, a lot of times the unsaid can be a lot worse than having an honest conversation, because then it raises immediate assumptions that, oh, you're not as committed to your job, or maybe they're looking elsewhere, or they're just not as good as we thought they would be. All of those kind of immediate judgments might come up, whereas if you're honest and you're making sure that the narrative's the right one and that people are understanding the concept. And I think that, there's another advantage, and I'm sure you've noticed that, and hopefully a lot of our listeners have as well, is there's a lot of connection, human connection, that happens through vulnerability. And while it's an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people, when you open up to somebody, to be within the reason of what you feel is comfortable, but it does create trust. It does help to reinforce the relationship. And actually, for a lot of people, it might be an opportunity as well to get closer to their line manager, to the people they work with, because actually they're getting a little glimpse into your personal life, and they get an opportunity to be there for you, which you're not giving them if you're not informing them.
Yeah, I mean, divorce is still a pretty frequent event. So, most likely you are going to be, talking with somebody who has experienced it or had a close friend that experienced it. And certainly that can make you, relatable. And, if you get the information from your lawyer, like you should expect to be gone, 4 days, etc., for depositions or meetings or, whatever it is. That's very sort of clear information as well that you can convey to, HR. And do you have enough sick days? Do you have enough vacation days? What sort of flexibility can you have while going through this process?
Yeah.
Because I think people do really underestimate it. I've also seen, I think because of the thing we touched on initially, where people sort of blame themselves for the divorce in one way or another, like, I picked this person, this is my problem. A lot of times I find people are very hesitant to reach out to even close friends.
Yeah.
To, especially at the beginning when they probably need to say, tell me what your divorce was like.
Yeah.
What would you do different? What was surprising to you? What did you like? What would you change? Different things like that, where they probably have people in their sphere that could probably give them some guidance.
I agree. I think for a lot of us, it is uncomfortable sharing that. And maybe also, quite a few people in the early stages might not be sure that this is actually going to go ahead. It's just like a lot of people don't share the problems they're having in their relationship until the relationship breaks down. But in the early days, some people just think, well, I don't want to be spreading this too widely because I'm not too sure what's going to happen here. But the irony is that that's when you need people most.
Right.
But I also do understand the need to select carefully the people you share with at the beginning. And, even in informing your employer, no one's saying that you have to go and cry or spill your guts or tell them every detail of why your divorce is breaking down or your marriage is breaking down. The idea is just to inform them that this is happening in your life. And so you can do it in a very matter-of-factly approach of saying, listen, I'm going through divorce, so I'm going to need to work a little bit later or, later in the evening and come in a bit later in the mornings or whatever it is. Or you can say, I'm really going through a very tough time, and go through the much more personal stuff. That's completely personal as a decision based on the quality of the relationship you have and also on how much you want to share.
Yeah.
I think that has to be very much left to each individual. But the idea of making sure that your employer is aware of the context, I think that avoids misunderstandings, and it helps everybody know exactly what's going on.
Because if you are, not performing, or you're running late and, different things like that, working through lunch when you don't traditionally, or, different things, don't let people fill in the holes and assume, you can, share as much as you want to, so that, they're, going through this, that's, understandable. We understand that. But again, you judge it based on your individual, situation and what is good for you. Generally, I have found transparency to be key, and also weigh your options with what type of divorce you want. I think a lot of people don't understand that you do have a choice. You have to choose pretty early on what road you're going down, so you don't get stuck on the litigation highway.
Yep.
But for example, with amicable cases, I've had several clients I've never met in person. It can all be done on Zoom. I had a lady who never took a day off work, even for her mediation. She was typing
Wow.
away while we were mediating. That was an unusual circumstance. So we do want a little bit more focus if we can get it. But, there are different choices you can make regarding the potential impact on your work, your kids, your finances, your time.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the more procedural the process, as in the more litigated, the more time it's going to take. It's that simple.
Yeah, the more hoops you have to jump through. And sometimes, that's the right choice for people, but do understand on the front end that you do have a choice. A lot of people just don't research that. And so, do that and weigh your options and pick a road that you hope can give you the most success, not just in your divorce, but in your life.
Yeah.
Because, finances will change, emotions are going to be high. So really do try to preserve the things that you can, like your employment, and do that.
Great.
Chloe, I probably connect you to a ton of members all the time, so I know how to reach you. But what is the best way for anybody listening to reach out to you if they want to work with you, and describe a little bit deeper about your services and what it is that you do for people through divorce?
Yeah. So the way to reach me is through my website, which is divorcewithchloe.com. And on my website, there is a big fat link at the top to book a free call. So everybody who is a potential new client can book an initial consultation. There's no strings attached. It's not a sales pitch. It's an opportunity for us to have a chat, see what's going on, and assess whether I'm the right person to help them. In terms of the support that I offer, that support, as I was saying, is that middle point between what a therapist does and what a lawyer does. It's practical support to guide you through the whole process. Mm-hmm. So the way I like to describe it is if you were going to go on a trip to a place that you've never been and you had no interest in, so you'd never even researched, and you knew somebody who'd lived there, and they can tell you, don't go to that area, this is not safe, don't take the taxis at night. It's all those insider tips and that support from somebody who's experienced the same thing and is able to guide you and avoid making the mistakes that they've made and that they've seen other people make.
That's such an interesting way to describe it. I've never heard of that. That's perfect. That's the perfect way to describe how Chloe helps people. And I'm sure if you're listening to this, you can tell Chloe has a bit of an accent, but you are based in London, but you help people all over the world, correct?
I do, yeah. I've got a lot of experience with the US, France, and the UK in particular. But I do have clients all over the world, in Italy, Austria, Germany, Japan, everywhere. What they usually have in common is that they will have an international piece in their divorce, either because the couple are from two different countries or because they've relocated together to another place or they have properties in different places. But I do work at an international level, in Zoom or in person, depending on where people are based.
Wonderful. If you are driving and you weren't able to write down exactly how to reach out to Chloe, don't worry, it's in the show notes, so you can save this episode and come back to it. If all else fails, you can reach out to us at Amicable Divorce Network and we will connect you to her directly. And that email is info@amicableddivorcenetwork.com. If you want to be asking a question about any of our professionals, or if somebody can help you, reach out and we can always have an answer for somebody to connect you to somewhere in the world. Because we have members everywhere. Thank you so much, Chloe, for joining us today. I really appreciate you presenting on this very popular topic.
Thank you for having me.